Quonset hut.
Quonset huts.
Yeah,
Quonset
those
huts.
really neat little things. I
Yeah.
always loved them. They're kind of great. Yeah, they had them actually here.
They're good for
I
children.
think this building was gone. And then these. Okay, when we came, we came to this place in 1948. Everybody had lice. So when you would drive in a new place, everybody has to go in, and there's somebody lift your shirts like this, and somebody goes with this little
DDT.
and they
Fumigate you.
these and in your pants here. And I still remember that. I still remember the night when we arrived here. The other thing, a lot of these places, because so much population had moved in through here through these years, there were bed bugs all over the place. And the British then would actually spray the insides of each room with some awful thing. I don't know, it smelled terribly. It was some kind of toxic item to kill them. And I think it kind of worked because they kind of disappeared. But what happened one night, they had sprayed one of these places and it caught fire. And I still remember this one of the most traumatic sort of experiences that I had when I was about 8 or 7. Seeing one of these things just in flames, something completely destroyed.
Gosh. But it wasn't being used at that time.
Oh, it was.
Oh, it was.
People lived there all the time.
I see.
Yeah. And this was fancy because we actually had a toilet, like I think 3-seat toilet in this building in the middle of the
So
structure.
the time you were telling us about with the man trying to find his gold ring, that was at another camp?
What was?
The man trying to find his
Oh, no,
gold
that was
ring.
actually here.
Ah.
Yeah, that was here. You had to go down here, and it was...
So you used that one as well?
It was
You used that one as well, those latrines?
yeah.
Did he find his ring? I can't remember.
You know, I don't recall that. I just remember the scene and then people afterwards standing around and kind of making facetious comments or encouraging him, and the guy was in despair with his little net. So instead of like
Sort of
Nabokov catching fire.
Right. So it was a butterfly net or a fishing net? What sort of a net?
Oh, I don't remember. Yeah, he just had made something.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was that he would dip in, pull it out, and the yuck would just go through it.
So obviously there are benches, right? And then these channels in concrete or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously the flushing mechanism was a small amount of water. Were they
No
gonna tilt?
flushing at all.
So it was a slight tilt. You mean you just sat there?
Yeah, and I think you just, oh my God, it was horrible. That's why, I think my stepfather was sort of very enterprising. We ended up, this was a fancy barracks, because it actually had a bathroom. I mean, very nice ones, if I remember right. I mean, real indoor toilets, so to speak, but we had to share it with the rest of the camp. But in here, you've seen army.
No, but... Yeah.
Okay, what you have is, you dig a ditch, deep, and you put on one side, you put a board across with holes in it where you can sit. And there were like a dozen of these right next to each other. The soldiers, when they needed to go and dispose of their little bodily fluids or whatever, they'd just sit on it. And you see actually pictures, even in World War I, people sitting with their pants rolled down and reading newspapers while they're sitting in a row.
Well, there are old pictures of Roman latrines out of marble at those British, near Hadrian's Wall or stuff. They're exactly the same as that. They've got the whole... like
pretty
that.
much.
So you would come in and the man was already in the...
Yeah, and it smelled awful. You could, as you approached it maybe 30 feet before, you could actually smell the shit. It was...
And how many people...
And then, I guess because there were DP camps, they actually kind of divided it up. So one side, the women toilet and the man toilet, and it was just this little partition.
And how many total could it serve at a time?
At the time, again,
100?
I'm just trying to remember. I would say there was maybe 10 holes on each side.
And the ditch then was...
The ditch must have been very deep, and I think what happened is when it was filled up, they just filled it in with dirt, covered it up, and dug a new one somewhere.
So this wasn't in concrete or anything.
No,
this was just in
it was a
ground.
real just.
So yes, a much more despairing act to try to find the gold ring.
Delightful. No, but I do remember the smell. You can't accept these things. Remember, I didn't know any better, so it just seemed. So my life in these camps, I considered kind of idyllic. And it all went down the drain when we came to the U.S., actually. It's kind of interesting.
My sister was in the Peace Corps in Morocco, and she had a friend there who, after they had both returned from Morocco, the friend was walking out in upstate New York or something, and was suddenly overcome by a nostalgia for Morocco. And she looked to one side, and it was a sewage farm.
No, let me see, I do that. I mean, the smell of, and I think they also put some kind of chemical in it, just in case to keep it, so it was even worse smelling than you can imagine.
So how long did it take to become adjusted to the United States? 5 years? Never.
No, really, I still think America is very exotic to me. That's the first thing that struck me, but it was a big disappointment. We didn't, when we left Germany, we lived in a different camp. It wasn't here. But we really wanted to come to the US for a very long time. And when we lived here, in 1949, we got our first sort of opportunity to actually come to the States. So you had to go to some kind of evaluation camp in northern Germany. And they rejected us because my mother had some kind of TB scars from her youth, and they were very strict about that. And that was very disappointing. And I still remember coming back. We had spent there 2 weeks. I think we left like this, and we came like this in 1949. And I still remember Mother to make me happy. She went to a bookstore, the guy who was selling books.
Oh, yes, right.
There was always somebody in these camps who had a little room and all the books that were being published all over the place. And I chose Robinson Crusoe, the first part and the second part. There's a second part, which is kind of boring, actually. It becomes a businessman or something. And I still see the cover. That was my excitement. That was my...
And it was in Latvian.
Yeah, in Latin. Oh, yes. Yeah, I didn't read German or anything by the time. And then 8 years later, we finally were told that we could possibly come. So we again go to this kind of intermediate place where being evaluated and everything looks okay. My grandmother, stepfather, mother, and six kids. And we go through it, and we spend a couple days there, and everything looks good. And then there's this American doctor who calls us all in, and he said, in English, or he tries to talk in German, very broken German with incredible accent. We always laughed about Americans trying to talk German. And he says, you can go, but Ilse kann nicht fahren. Ilse is my oldest sister. She's 2 years younger than me. And she had some kind of shadow in her lens. Let's see, I was going on 16, she was about 13 or 14. And we're just all sitting and looking at each other. We can't believe this. And then something happened and they let us go within like half a day. We were all set. Meanwhile, what has happened in Germany has this, the camps are being abolished and the Germans are moving them into cities. And part of the complex where we stayed in this camp, they had a Latvian high school. And both my parents were teachers there. And besides that, my father was also, my stepfather actually, but I lived with him so long, they call him father. He was also involved with the Latvian sort of government in exile. He was some kind of secretary to some big guy. So we were sort of pretty well off considering everybody else. And remember, they're teachers, so sort of high up. But the thing, and Germany was going through this Wirtschaftswunder. The economy improved incredibly. All of a sudden, Germany was becoming rich and successful. So it was a bad time to leave. But we were into the spirit of moving that we did come. And it was incredible disappointment. My parents had to work. First of all, we got a house. We came in '57. There was a kind of economic downturn. Eisenhower was president. And we had relatives living here, so that was kind of helpful. We rented a house in '57. My parents had to get jobs, obviously. So they ended up working in factories. My father had to sweep factory floors at night. And my mother worked in some kind of textile factory. So for them it was this, and not much money. And we lived practically, the first house we lived was behind, it was on the other side of the tracks, with American expression. We had a train, freight train, that would go sort of where that house is. Like 6 times a day. And the other side of the street was a paper factory that was moving all day and night and smelled badly.
Yeah. A lot of chemicals.
Here we are from a place which is sort of, very simple, but it's in the forest and the mountains, and everything is kind of fun. And ended up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I really respect my parents. They really had a hard time. Remember, they had 6 kids.
Yeah.
And they had a grandmother who brought us up, because my parents had to work. And I hated being in the U.S. Kind of mixed feelings, actually. I hated it because I knew what had happened, that we had fallen in some kind of a trap. Because it really, all of a sudden, instead of being sort of at a certain level with everybody else, a little higher, things were free, there was a kind of openness. We all of a sudden crunched into this little society that we really didn't like. We didn't speak the language. My parents, my father spoke English. Not that it helped him though that much at first. So I really hated it. But what happened is, I remember going to school, and I remember American kids were the most friendliest people in the world. I made friends just like that. I would have these guys and, drive me home, drive me to school, trying to teach me English. And the very odd thing that had happened, I had at one point, I was really into athletics. And even though I was very slight, I weighed like 145 pounds, I had started something called, the shot put. It's throwing this really heavy thing. Yeah. And living here or somewhere in other camp, I had practiced. I just got really hooked on it by myself. And in gym class, we have to do this, and the coaches can't believe that I can throw this thing that far, further than anybody else. So for a year, I was an incredible success in doing this. And then meanwhile, I think we were in hell. Yeah. So there was this. I think I hated being here, even to the extent that I refused to speak English for 6 months, even though I was in school. I don't know how I accomplished that. What was your question?
We started with something. But I was curious with this, to get back to this. Was this where the apples were, or you were telling me once about apples? The fruit.
Yeah.
Was that here where the trees lined the streets?
Oh no, that was pretty much a kind of European thing, where the trees, the roads. I don't know if the Romans started it or not. Country roads on each side were fruit trees, mostly apple trees, and which was also interesting to keep out insects from attacking the trees, they had these painted white with some kind of chemical. So you drive down this road, on each side you have these rows of beautiful trees, but they're all white, about this high from the root.
Yeah. And anyone could pick the
yeah,
fruit.
I mean, they're just on a road.
Yeah.
But we would steal, we would run and steal. I mean, not parents, we would steal rutabagas and kale from farmers' fields and potatoes at night just to eat. And then it was odd. We were actually treated much better, for example, than the Germans themselves were. Until the Germans took over, like in the late 50s, middle 50s. So the Germans really hated us. I remember my mother and I driving on she was riding a bicycle, and I was sitting in the front in some basket. And the Germans throwing stones at us.
Wow.
You know, with the rocks. Anyway, you asked me a question.
We started
I
with
got
the
into
latrines
this
here.
because the only thing I started talking about this because in that move thing I mentioned to Ian that I've been a refugee all my life and I'm living through this refugee syndrome still. And then he asked me when I threw in this DP camp thing. That's so.
It took off.
Yeah.
What are they? A flaneur in the DP camps. It's a perfect title. I said a flaneur in the DP camps. It's a perfect title.
Yeah.
Ferris Strauss Giroux, 2016.
60.